said they're interested. Jake was gonna talk to that person this week.
Everybody ready?
Was that? I don't think a lot of people know about it, to tell you the truth. There's some other people that I think might be interested, that I was gonna reach out to.
Yes, we're ready.
No, she's not in that district.
We're good.
No.
Yeah, let's go.
Everybody ready?
Yep.
Everybody ready? All right, apologies for the tardiness here. Busy day up the hill. I'd like to call the Monday, November 26th Committee of the Albany County Legislature Law Committee to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the previous meeting minutes from last month. Has everybody had an opportunity to review them? Any questions? Any motion to approve them? Second, Mr. Kraus, seconded by Mr. Feeny, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so at the request of the sponsors, I'm just gonna do this in bulk order, and if anybody has any objection there too, simply let me know, we'll go to, return it. We're gonna table. Everybody ready? I'm gonna read off a list. Items number 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Wait a minute. 11,
I had you date.
13,
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 20, and 27. Unless anybody on the committee has any objection.
What's wrong with 20?
Everybody got that?
That's the local law itself.
Okay. So now, I'm going to take up item number 21, which is one of the only RLAs on the agenda.
Chris,
Yes, Doug,
I'd like to have number 1 on the table list.
you want to add number 1? Okay, so we're going to table number 1 as well at the request of Legislator Bullock.
Mr. Chair, also number 2.
We'll table item number 2 at the request of Legislator Clenahan. Anything else from any of the members? Any of the members in attendance? Great, so we'll take up, we'll move now to item number 21 on the agenda. Authorizing an agreement regarding the Violent Offender Identification Directive, otherwise known as VOID.
Good evening, Chairman and members. This is a request for an MOU with the Albany Police Department. This is renewal. We had an earlier MOU similar that expired this year. What this MOU is asking for is we provide services of global tracking of our highest risk offenders, and they're identified through part of our actual GIVE grant with DCJS, which Albany Police and ourselves are both part of. And the GPS is provided by us, and the Albany Police has it in their grant that they receive additional funding, and they would provide the additional feedback to us for the services that we perform.
Any questions from members of the committee? Mr. Bergdorf,
Quick
question?
observation. I was on a grand jury, and this particular system solved a crime within 30 seconds of when it occurred. Because when they dispatched the police analyst in the city of Albany reached out to the people who checked the GPSs, and they knew who it was and where it was and how they could follow them instantaneously.
It's
Tremendous program.
It is amazing technology of the information that can be provided from this, and our highest risk offenders are identified in conjunction with the police and the Crime Analysis Center.
Any other questions? Get a motion? Motion by Mr. Clenahan, second by Mr. Kraus, all in favor, or Mr. Bergdorf, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, item number 21 is out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Great, so we'll just move now to the beginning of the agenda. Item number 3, local law number H, this is Mr. Clenahan's, right?
Yes. Yeah, in light of the public hearing we had last month, there were actually several really good comments and very valid points, so I amended it to reflect pretty much all those points that came from the public hearing.
Great.
We reflected the new version of local law here.
All right.
In particular, there were real concerns about private citizens being able to help the distressed animal. We took that out. For the other recommendations, we added veterinarians and veterinarian technicians.
Great. So is it your desire to move the local law now
So what
as amended?
In sum and substance, what happens if you see something, say something, call someone?
Yes, and first responders and veterinarians and technicians in a particularly grave situation where the animal's life is in imminent danger could break in.
How about animal control officer?
Yes.
That was added specifically? Because we had some comment from the Colony PD that the animal control officers are not peace officers, so that they are not actually,
It's in B. It's in B, Paul.
it isn't big?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, that's wonderful.
Okay. So if everybody's okay, I'd love to move this out.
Can I have a que-
Mr. Kraus has a question?
You would not consider these substantive changes that require another public hearing?
I would actually consider them the opposite. They narrow the scope of the law in particular in response to particular concerns.
Well, even the narrowing can still mean substantive changes.
I would disagree. I would think substantive would involve a dramatic change in the outlook of the law or a particularly different look at the coverage of the law. I think in this case, we narrowed the scope and made it more particular. And to be honest, I think that kind of situation would lead to unending public hearings and would actually create motivation for the members to ignore public comments.
No, I don't think that's the case.
Well, I disagree. If this was a substantive change and require ongoing public hearings, it'd be incumbent on me if I wanted to move this quickly to ignore them, which I didn't want to do. These were very valuable concerns, and I think that's the whole point of the public hearing.
I'd like an opinion of council on that, if I could.
Sure, Mr. Kraus. We discussed this with Mr. Clenahan, and it's our opinion that these are not substantive changes for basically the reasons that Mr. Clenahan said, that what this does is it narrows the scope of, rather than expand it, narrows the scope of applicable individuals who can, intervene in the situation where a dog or animal or other animal is in a dangerous or precarious situation. So I agree. I don't think it requires, it's a substantive change, and I don't think it requires a public hearing.
Thank you.
In the future, how do we
Excuse me, wait a minute. There are more than one council on the table.
Yeah. Yes.
I would actually provide an opinion directly opposite of that, because what the public hearings are, when somebody reads a notice and they read the legislation, they may have read the legislation and say, well, listen, I'm a private citizen, and I will be able to break a window to get in to get this dog, so therefore I'm not going to come in because the local law says exactly what I want to be able to do. You've now taken out a substantive provision of that particular legislation, which may cause an individual to come to the public hearing, a second public hearing, and say, I want you to add this for the following reasons. So you're taking a large portion of this out, substantive text, which affects individuals that may have not shown up for the first public hearing. So therefore, I think having a secondary public hearing, and it may be a short one, maybe two people saying we love the changes, would be proper.
If I could be heard on that, I have a few concerns with that. At some point, we really need to move forward with legislation, and our process is now we would have to reintroduce another public hearing. This would take several months. Frankly, by the time this got done, we'd be out of winter, and we would miss that window of protecting animals from extreme cold. I think the whole point of having a public hearing is to really encourage input from the public and encourage the members to incorporate that in their legislation. If there's a reverse motivation to do that, if I can move legislation quicker by ignoring the public, that defeats the whole purpose of the public hearing, and I don't think that, as a policy thing, is what we want to do. I think we want to be able to incorporate public comments as frequently and as valuably as possible and move forward accordingly. So, I appreciate Republican Council's opinion. I would ask this meeting to move forward tonight.
Ms. Cunningham?
Yes, so just so I understand, the changes are the underline?
Yes.
So
The changes to the underline and the brackets are stricken.
Okay, so essentially, you added to the list of individuals that can be authorized that you contact, right?
Yes, and 2E and F are stricken.
Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're, obviously you don't have the role of counsel, but it seems like you're adding to a list of folks that already exist. I mean, when I saw that, I didn't think that was more than a pretty minor change reflective of the public hearing comments. I thought it was responsible, but I didn't think substantively, there's a big kind of change in the intent of the legislation or the ultimate outcome at all.
To me, this is exactly how the public hearing, public comment process should work. So folks came forward with some real concerns and some opposition as it was. I thought they were completely valid points. We incorporated in the law. I think everybody wants to move forward.
Mr. Kraus?
I don't disagree that that's the function of the public hearing, but I also think that when there are substantive changes, and I happen to think they are, with all due respect, I think that we owe it to the public to come back and say, okay, we had a public hearing, we heard your comments, here are the changes, and I think the Council for the Republicans is correct. Some people you might only have one or two people coming in and saying, yep, great, it can be done. And I would even be willing to expedite such a public hearing, recommend that it happen sooner rather than later, so it wouldn't be 6 or 7 months until we take further action on this.
Assuming this were to go forward, and I'm not assuming anything, but theoretically if it does tonight, this local law as well as the entire agenda will be put out for public advertising for the December meeting. There'll be a public comment period before the meeting. There will be adequate time for people to make comments. Not to mention, this has been around a while. There's been time and time and time again.
Yeah, but I don't think we should be doing something just because it's been around a while. If there are substantive changes, and I think there are substantive changes, that's what we should do. And
If your concern is that the public won't have the chance to weigh in on the new legislation as it is, how is the public comment period in December not adequate?
Well, why don't we-
I don't think everybody can come out to the public comment.
Mr. Bergdorf and then
Let's
Mr.
have a public
Feeny.
hearing.
Two points, and I don't know if, this is too easy.
Sounds like a loaded question.
Number one, I share the concern about the issue of substantive change. And I would hope that maybe one of the things that I'd like to suggest is our two councils get together and discuss some guidelines for what is considered substantive change or not, so that we have something that provides guidance as we go forward in a way so that the concept of substantive change can be treated equally for all legislation. So, it isn't a question, oh, well, on this one, it's a major change. On this one, it's not a major change. So that's suggestion number one. Suggestion number two is what would stop us tonight from passing a resolution, sending this for public hearing on December 13th, whatever date it was, which is the night of our next meeting, and have the public hearing, and then assuming that this passes muster, you pass it later that night.
I don't believe there would be a public hearing until the end of January at
There's
this
not.
point.
Yeah, we went through this with the redistricting legislation. and
There's
the
no way
time
to
frame of the
schedule this
calendar.
for December?
There's no
At one of the
public hearing
dates?
in December.
We could schedule a public hearing we have two meetings scheduled in
I
December.
would love to have public hearings.
Well, look, I
guess what would that
understand the
accomplish
concerns.
that the public comment period for the summer meeting wouldn't?
I mean, that's my viewpoint. If folks have still concerns and comments and questions about the law, they could show up to the meeting and voice them there. And then I would hope that Mr. Clanahan, if there's significant change or opposition, he would, bring it back to committee so we can make those changes. But I tend to agree that it's narrower scope myself. So it's not really a substantive change. But I do agree, I think, Paul, you raised a valid point about what exactly is substantive. And I think that, moving forward, we're going to get into this on every bill, back and forth.
And that's my point.
And I think that's a fair point. So that's something that I think, we could take a look at, with our staff and try to come up with an idea of how we're going to handle this moving forward.
And I think when leadership
Sure.
and both councils look at that issue, perhaps a way to expedite a second subsequent public hearing would make sense too, because
Okay.
at this point, you gotta do an entirely new one, wait for it to get reassigned to committee, wait for the committee to hear it, goes back again to full legislature. I mean, it's a month and a half, 2-month process. That's probably streamlinable also.
Yeah, Mr. Feeney's, he wants
Gonna make a motion to move it out,
motion.
positive
Mr.
recommendation.
Higgins, Mr. Chairman, I'm not a member of the committee, but since everyone's spoken, can I just make a quick comment?
Briefly.
It's got nothing to do with passing or not, I don't vote. Paul brought up the point that I wanted to make, and actually, I agree almost entirely with what Mr. Clanahan has said. I'm not debating whether it's substantive. What I wanted to underscore here is the process. And, I think I've got a local law that's come back for changing their, THER, to their, THEIR, okay? So, and it's been around a long time. right? And it's gonna take a month and a half to get in front of the public again. We do need a streamlined process. I like the idea of the secondary, or, some way of creating a more expedited hearing. But creating criteria for what is substantive and not substantive would be absolutely ideal for giving fair treatment to all
I think you're right.
resolutions in law.
So,
Thank
we'll
you.
look at that moving forward. That being said, Mr. Feeney had a motion to move this out with a favorable recommendation.
Favorable, yes.
Second.
I have a second by Ms. Cunningham. All those in favor? Aye.
I will, may I explain my vote here?
Sure, of course you can. Briefly.
I know you put a lot of work into this. And I will support the bill going out, but it's with reservations, because I think there should be a fuller discussion. Obviously, there's not going to be a fuller discussion, but hopefully people will come out to the public comment period and make their case. If there is a case to be made, and maybe there's no case to be made.
I feel exactly the same way. I would have voted, I was thinking about voting for it without recommendation. I will vote for it with recommendation. But I think we've made our point here that going forward, we really need a bar that you're above or below. Right here.
Item number 4, local law number J for 2018 is defined.
I'm going to table that. We need a full, I didn't get a count for
Was there anybody in the negative? Unanimous.
Okay, so that passes unanimously.
With a favor. Item number 4, Mr. Fine, this is your bill.
I'm going to table it.
Tabling item number 4 at Mr. Fine's request, we table 5 and 6. Item number 7, local law M. This is the, you saw, this is my bill. We're gonna table this too. Sorry. Had a busy day. 8, 9, 10, 11, all right, so now we're down to 16.
What about 10?
So,
Wait, what about?
Oh, 10. Sure, Ms. Cunningham, I'm sorry. Item number 10, we're moving to 10.
So, can we pass this out? So, while Curtis is passing out markup, just a little background for folks not on the committee. As I think most people know, this is, local law O has gone through many iterations and changes. The most recent update and what you're receiving in your hand right now is the product of 2 work sessions. One was with the majority council who went through in a session with me and the sponsors about 3 weeks ago now, went through very, very carefully with kind of the fine-tooth comb, made some changes. Then we had an additional work session where we had both councils, Republican and the majority and minority councils along with the Chair's Council. We did a work session to further go through the legislation. So what you have in your hand is the product of those 2 work sessions. So what I would like to do is quickly go through some of these. Some of them are merely kind of grammatical errors that were fixed, or charter compliant changes, or other changes that reflected what the councils believed would be prudent. So I'm going to go through those really quickly if the committee is okay with that.
I think that would be great.
Okay. And councils, please feel free to correct me when I misstate something, because I'm sure I will. The first, I would say, substantive change is at the bottom of the first page. We referenced the wrong section of the charter that we would amend, and it's that 2702. Both councils agreed that that was a modification that needed to be made. Anything else on that?
nope.
Okay. Moving on, under the first inside page there, under section 1A, we changed the language to delete the upon publication of the results of the federal census, making it more applicable for other changes that could occur that wouldn't be connected to the census. So essentially it's the same thing, but in the event there's other things that would trigger a redistricting requirement, that change was made. Both councils agreed with that, all councils. And we added the words "to the extent practicable" in the same section A, under section 1, sub A. And that just reflects that if something happens with the, say, state reapportionment process where it's delayed, that we wouldn't be delayed indefinitely. So we changed that to add a qualifier there. Under the subsection B, commission composition, we linked that language underlined there preceding the creation of the commission, essentially wanting to make sure that 4-year time frame that offered those disallowances of who would be eligible to serve on the commission. Essentially, we wanted it anchored to when each commission would be put into place. So say we have a commission in 50 years from now, we would want that 4 years anchored to prior to that, say, 2050 census, rather than passing it, in 2019 for the 2020 census. Everyone understand that? Didn't really explain that very well.
I do have a question, though.
Sure.
Does this apply to committee members?
Committee,
Local political
Yes.
committee members? Because it just sa's officer, I'm not sure whether that
I
term...
think we're going to get into some of the changes later that deal with that.
This is a little bit further in the document.
Okay. Moving on to the next page, I think, we have...
Section D.
I'm sorry, section
D.
Section D or B?
D as in dog.
Yeah, Section D. This is the MMD subcommittee. Again, we made the same conforming change, what I just said, related to the MMD subcommittee. Under D2, we changed a shall to a may or a male.
Other way around.
You changed may to a shall.
May to a shall, I'm sorry. So the appointments shall be made in the year of the census after repeated solicitation. Pretty clear change there. Okay, moving on to commission independence, section F. Under here, we, under 1A, I'm trying to remember what we did here, within the 4 years immediately preceding the creation of the commission. I think we just buttoned this up a
It's to
little
be
as far as
consistent.
the consistency of making sure it was, buttoned up to the 4 years prior to this commission, any commission. Under subsection 1B, under F, you can see we deleted the campaign contributions. Council advised that that was a protected class?
Sure, so there's, making political contributions is a constitutionally protected activity under both the U.S. Constitution and under the state constitution. Particularly when you are, how this previously read is it prohibited people who make maximum contributions to any political candidate from serving on the commission as a commission or subcommittee member. There is the potential of raising a constitutional violation if you make that kind of prohibition. So our suggestion was to strike that language.
Just as an observation, I don't want to play lawyer without a license, but in the, under federal law, a financial advisor cannot make financial contributions to a political candidate. And under the state law, employees who are officers of a public authority cannot make political contributions. So I would suggest to you that the prohibition for federal and state employees of making contributions is not absolute, and that there are instances where the federal government and the state government have said it is inappropriate to have political contributions in this realm. So I would just...
What I'd add to that, Mr. Bergdorf, is you're correct in specific, very limited context that's allowed. This does not meet those kind of specific limited contexts from our reading. So you're right, there are
Okay, well, you said
yeah.
it was prohibited by federal and state law.
Sure, I said, yeah, broadly, it is. There are limited contexts where it's allowed. Our reading of the case law doesn't seem to analogize. This is one of those limited contexts.
Ernest, anything you want to add to that, or you also were in agreement with our council?
No, I don't have any comments right now.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, so moving on, under E, or no, wait a minute.
So just, Joanne, just,
Yeah.
so B is going to be struck,
Oh, right.
subsection B, so
Right.
C becomes B.
Right, sorry, mine looks like it's E, but it's B. So we have a new B, because we struck B. So under there, we did some work on the limitations of who could be on the commission, and changed the language, and it's just more, I think, appropriate. Staff and consultants to persons under contract with, or any person with an immediate family relationship with any county, or instead of locally, we changed it to publicly elected official. We also offered exclusions, and we did this in another section of the local law, that we excluded school board members, library trustees, and fire commissioners, basically carving out those nonpartisan elected individuals who run for, trustees of various entities. Okay. Moving on, under section G, we changed a may to a shall. Under section H, the RFP process, we tightened up this language a little bit, essentially just to conform to whatever the requirements are for Albany County in terms of, what process the RFPs have to go through, depending on the dollar amount and so forth. So we're just conforming to what Albany County requires. And that's just a little bit tighter, but the intent is the same. Okay, under section I, we deleted the reference to the Pope case, and that was a recommendation of council that we cover it with the above language related to the federal law reference, the Voting Rights Act section and so forth, and that we didn't need it, and it could potentially, if it were struck down, cause problems in the future.
We didn't want to be faced with a situation, if there was a change in case law, we had something in our law
Right.
that related to something that was no longer
Right.
the precedent.
Right, right, because we hope it's still around in 50 years when we're all gone. And
Gone.
no, gone from this work.
Oh.
Okay, so that was that.
Gone.
We
Yeah, Gil will be-
also, under that 2F, you can see we eliminated, and this relates to who's on, no, this is related to how the lines and the maps are drawn.
Do you want me to address this, Joanne?
What?
Since it's a legal issue, you want me to
Yeah,
address that?
yep, go ahead.
So the reason we struck that language has to do with, initially it said, party registration and voting history data shall be excluded from the initial mapping phase. The legal issue with that is when you look at the controlling precedent, which is Gingles v. Thornburg and a series of cases which follow, when a map drawer has to consider which minority districts to draw, there are a number of factors they're allowed to consider. Voting history in terms of how minority groups vote is vital to understanding the need for drawing the majority-minority districts. So it's our opinion that excluding that could be problematic, so the sponsors agreed to.
Take it out.
Right.
Okay, the next section, J1, we deleted the word members. And the reason was that the members of the commission, it's clear they would not be paid, so we eliminated that And I think that was consistent with what our intent was anyway.
Yes.
Under section 2 of J, we also made the same change and just put the amplifier of publicly elected officials to conform with the earlier change I mentioned. Okay, under J4, we're going to house all of the reapportionment materials, agendas, minutes, etc., not with the office of the chair. It's much more appropriate to have it be the office of the clerk, where other documents are also housed. Okay, under K2, we also added some language upon recommendation by the councils that essentially we would want to carve out some language in there that would allow for confidential materials to be provided to the commission that would fall under the attorney-client privilege, so essentially offering that kind of opportunity when it was appropriate. And then last page, we have, under the report, the final report of the commission, we made some changes under that subsection 2, under L, that essentially was reflective of what our intent was in the process when the commission report would be brought to the legislature. So because we made changes, I'll read it through. No later than 30 days after receiving the final report, the county legislature shall consider the recommendations included in the commission's final reapportionment report, and by a majority vote of the whole number of its members, adopt the commission's report on legislative districts. Should the legislature fail to adopt the commission's report on legislative districts at such time, the commission shall be empowered to continue its work through subsequent amendment process to ensure legislative passage and enactment. The legislature may provide feedback and recommendations to the commission in order to assist the commission in providing an updated reapportionment report for consideration by the legislature. The county legislature shall consider the recommendations included in any updated report by a majority vote of the whole number of its members. I think we need it to adopt the commission's report on legislative districts. You see that, Kevin? And then, so essentially kind of mapped out the process at the end, which would allow for amendment processes. It doesn't say how many. The intent is certainly not to have this go into perpetuity, but to have a conclusion, but to offer feedback if there is a negative vote of the reapportionment report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Joanne. Joanne and I have, and others, have worked on this piece of legislation even longer than you worked on the dog. So, probably. And the document that you have before you tonight is the most recent draft. We understand that there are some issues that still need to be addressed. I think especially from the Republican side of the aisle, not to say that the Democrats might not have other issues as well, but we think they are few, and we are hoping that over the next few weeks we can come to a consensus among all the members so that we can move forward. So we welcome any other comments on this. That's why it's being provided to all of you tonight. But we are, all of us who are involved are very excited about trying to move this forward in a format that satisfies almost everyone's concerns. Obviously, you never get everything you want all the time, but consensus is what we do here. We think we're on the right track. This local law and the many local laws that preceded it, I think, are an indication that we truly do want to get this right. We would like to have not a close vote on this. We would like to have a very overwhelming vote so that when we move forward, all the parties involved are aiming towards a target of success. What we don't want to do is be in the situation that we've been in the last three apportionments. And I don't know if any of us sitting at the table right now have been a part of that. I know I was not. Joanne certainly was not. Wanda was. That's right. Which just goes to show you that this is I think, a very expansive bipartisan effort, and we'd like to be a successful effort so we avoid court cases and legal fees that the county has paid out in 1990, 2000, 2010. We'd like that not to be the case in 2020. So please, your comments would be accepted.
We're nearing the end of the road on this, folks.
And the only thing, Joanne, and Peter, the only thing I'll add to this, and we discussed this in our meeting, and Wanda as well, there are, again, these are the comments we've made. I just echo that there are some questions in terms of wording, particularly with this final section L, which we discussed as far as delegating your authority to the commission. Ultimately, you all as legislators are the ones who pass the districts. So it's not the commission passing the districts. So there's some wording that possibly can be, I know you're in discussions, so anyway.
All right, so everybody's got a copy of it. It's out there for the other members of the body. We're getting to the end of the road on this. There's going to be another public hearing on it. We expect to have a vote, hopefully in January or February, on this legislation if all goes well with your continuing conversations. I think this is great. I know it's taking a long time.
Public hearing won't be till
The public hearing will be in January, and then hopefully, if all goes well, potentially a vote in February. So, with that, Ms. Cunningham.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is, it's our intent, so look for this, to possibly have a special law committee meeting in December, because we do want to keep the momentum going and keep moving forward on this. I do think we are gonna get to a point, and I've said this about 45 times, that there will be a point where it's pencils down, and not everybody is gonna get everything they want or be 100% happy. But we've worked on this intensively for more than 2 years, and I think we've moved the ball down the field significantly, and with each iteration, and now these changes, I think, are the maybe 4th iteration, 5th of the bills together that Wanda and Peter and I sat down and worked on. This committee's had 2 extensive markups where we spent, I don't know, more than an hour each time working on changes. I invite your changes, or your comments rather, your ideas, but again, we're gonna get to a point where it's pencils down and we're gonna go. We are offering a resolution that will be voted on for a public hearing that will be in January, is that right?
Currently, the resolution which Ms. Cunningham introduced will be on the agenda and should be referred to committee, and as it stands now, the public hearing will be in January 29th, 2019.
Great. All right.
But it's our intent to have this done in the early part of 2019, which I think many of us would like to work on other things, so.
At your request then, Ms. Cunningham, will we table item number 10 pending that new public hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll table 10. Everybody's got a copy of it. Expect this to come forward in Q1 2019. So now we'll move to 16. This is public hearing on local law R.
We're going to table that.
All right, this one's tabled at Mr. Fine's request. 17 was tabled. 18, public hearing on S.
I'll table that, Mr. Chair.
All right, 18, tabled at Mr. Clenahan's request. Item number 19, this is Mr. Drake's. Mr. Drake,
Yeah, we've withdrawn that.
you're gonna withdraw it?
Oh, wait, no, wait, which one are we on? I'm sorry.
19.
Oh,
Law
19.
F, nepotism.
I don't have that as 19, I have that as 20. Okay, sorry, I was looking at 19.
Anti-nepotism, we're not
Okay.
pro-nepotism here, I'm sorry.
Okay, here we go. No, we are tabled this for now pending comments from other legislators.
Okay, 19 is tabled. I would just note, Mr. Mayo's been working on this also, so hopefully he's in the loop as well. Item number 20 is tabled. 21 we did. All right, 22, we're zipping right along here, folks. This is Resolution 523. Sam, this is yours.
Yeah, happy to speak on this. This would direct the clerk of the Albany County Legislature to submit this resolution as an official comment to the Department of Homeland Security as part of their official comment process. This would be in opposition to a proposed rule change by the federal government, which would change the definition of public charge, making it so that immigrants who are on, this is legal immigrants who are on public assistance programs, supplemental assistance programs such as food stamps, housing assistance, Medicaid, they'd now be deemed a public charge and would be inadmissible for entry or for legal status. So if they applied for a change in status, for example, they would likely to be denied that change in legal status if they were on these programs.
So just to be clear, you're not, the resolution itself, it's not like a proclamation where we're urging them to do one thing or another. You would like this to be the official statement of the county legislature via a vote, an affirmative vote at a meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, this is,
That's right.
as many here probably know, in federal government, as part of the rulemaking process, it's not an act of Congress, it's part of the rulemaking process, and they solicit public comment. So public individuals of the public can submit official comments as well as governmental bodies.
Any questions for the sponsor?
I have a question, I have a question for you, but I have a question for council too. Have we done this before?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge.
I've been here 11 years.
All right, so we're doing something new.
Sounds like it.
There's no precedent for it. Okay, Sam, you mentioned that we're reacting to proposed rules at the federal level.
Yes.
Do we have a copy of what those proposed rules are?
I could provide some information, I don't have a copy with me. The resolution does explain some details, some of the proposed rules. I did pass around I printed
I'm
out.
sure it's like hundreds and hundreds of.
It probably would, it is,
a
but
quick
sometimes
fact sheet. It's not the everything in the entire text. But essentially, right now, the definition of public charge is limited to cash assistance programs such as temporary assistance for needy families, Social Security income, and government-funded long-term institutional care. This would vastly expand what's considered a public charge. So, I view this as an attack on immigrants, an attack on especially
I'm not
immigrants.
I'm not questioning your
And I understand
motivation
that.
here. I really,
Yes.
I'm concerned in that this body, as far back as at least Mr. Higgins and maybe others who served longer, we've never done anything like this. This is new ground. I'm not comfortable with that.
It's a first for everything, Mr. Kraus.
I suppose there is. And I appreciate this, but this is not from the federal government. This is from an organization. So
Yeah,
I'm just,
Ms. Cunningham and Mr. Bergdorf.
I'm just concerned about that, Sam, and I would find it hard to support
Yeah.
that. I like what you're trying to do.
I don't know why we don't comment on rulemaking all over the place. There's all kinds of opportunity for us to comment on significant policy change that's made through the rulemaking process. I mean, many of us do that routinely, and it really is an opportunity for not just organizations and individuals and, other entities, but also municipalities to make their positions known on really important policy change. So I think it's actually a great idea. I don't know why we don't do more of it, other than it's extraordinarily time-consuming to write comments to any kind of rulemaking initiative. I did one this summer that was this thick. The letter itself was 20 pages, and it had addendums that made it an unbelievably labor-intensive process. I'd like the idea of actually doing it via some sort of resolution like this, where it's more of an affirmative statement, rather than going through the intricacies of what the actual policy change were in the rulemaking process. I'm sure other municipalities probably already do this, but I think it's a great idea. I don't know why we don't do more of it.
Mr. Bergdorf.
come as a surprise, I sort of disagree with that. I have no idea what this federal regulation does or does not do. And absent having it, doing some research on it, I don't find myself able to vote because I don't know if I agree with it or don't agree with it. No, let me finish.
Yeah.
And I think we're entering a slippery slope here. Because if we're going to start commenting on every state legislative proposal, well, you know, I'm going to write up a two-page thing and say, I want this to be Albany County's testimony to the Senate Environmental Conservation Committee. and then everybody's going to have to determine whether or not that's the right position or the wrong position. We might as well create a Foreign Affairs Committee of the county legislature to do this. But there's a reason that we have not done urging resolutions. And I personally am very uncomfortable with this. If the sense here is to vote on this without even having the information of what the federal reg is, we don't know what we're voting for.
But isn't that, Mr. Bergdorf, isn't that on the onus of the backs of the members that are sitting around the table? To do that due diligence?
Well, wouldn't we be given background material which would give us, other than an advocate's memo, which none of us got? All we got was a page-and-a-half synopsis that, there are things we pass that have unintended consequences. And I would like to know, before we pass something, whether or not there is a chance of an unintended consequence.
Mr. Fine, I'll let you respond, and then I think the council has a point.
Thank you. So yeah, this has been on the agenda, published for quite a bit of time now. It's going to be on the agenda until we vote on it, if we pass this through the committee, and you'll have plenty of time to look at the exact wording of the regulation and make a decision on how you vote in that period of time. And, I think it's, as Joanne mentioned, these federal regulations are a lot of pages. It's, not everyone's going to want to read it, but it should be available for everyone, and it is available online. It's a public document. Anyone can look it up. When it comes to, I would like to add the impact this does have on the county, especially county money flowing into our county. As Chair of Social Services Committee, I'm especially concerned about this. There's a lot of money that comes in through the federal and state government that goes to immigrants within this county. Immigrants that would now be faced with the decision whether or not they should leave these programs because now they would risk their legal status. And that money goes right back into the economy. So I think this is something that does have a significant impact on county government operations and on the benefit the county overall. I think this is something.
Does this impact legal immigrants and non-legal immigrants? Illegal immigrants?
Also illegal.
Well, I'm trying to be...
Whatever term you want, I prefer the term undocumented, but I understand, I understand what
people who are here contrary to federal law.
Yes.
If it does...
I believe you have to have legal status to get these federal programs. The federal government is very strict about. For example, SNAP or Medicaid, you have to be a legal resident, I believe, to qualify for those programs. So it would only affect those people that can qualify for those programs.
Kevin?
Sure, the only point that I would like to point out, because public comment has been thrown around a lot here, the public comment process, just to step back here within the confines of the Federal Administrative Procedure Act, has a very specific meaning, and typically public comments are a comment plus your perspective. It's not just an objection. So this isn't a traditional public comment. If your intention is to make a traditional public comment within the confines of the Administrative Procedure Act, it could be, and we've talked about this, Mr. Fine, much more effective to go the route of a much more in-depth objection than what's here. So that's just something to be aware of. Public comment is not, we're using it informally here. It has a specific meaning within the Administrative Procedure Act, so it's something to be considered.
Sam, I'll let you respond to it. It's your bill ultimately, so it's your call on what you want to do with it.
Sure. Yeah, when it comes, I think that this resolution actually lays out pretty well what our objections are in the whereas clauses. And I would like to add that if you go online to the federal e-rulemaking site, there's a drop-down menu where you can say if you're commenting as an individual, as a local government body, state government body. So it's clear that they're soliciting comments from legislative bodies like ourselves.
Paul, and then Joanne. Doug.
I understand your commitment to this issue, but I think I would like to know from the Social Services Commissioner, from the Commissioner of the Budget, what the implications of this are on the Albany County budget. Specifically, how would this affect eligibility? Who would it make eligible? what revenue streams you would get, what revenue streams you can lose. But until we know those sorts of things, or can even see a federal regulation, I don't see how we can make a judgment. I mean,
That's your opinion, everybody's entitled to one. Joanne,
So,
and then Brian.
just so we
third
understand
Doug,
what
and then
this is.
We're gonna shut it down.
The notice of proposed rulemaking means the federal government, through the rulemaking process, is asking for comments. They are getting literally thousands and thousands and thousands of comments from entities far and wide across the country. They then take those comments, and usually the comment period is like 90 days or something. They take those comments, and then they digest them, and then they issue a final rule. This resolution is an affirmative statement of support for undocumented citizens that many of us worry deeply about. This has no force at all. This is one affirmative statement in a sea of thousands and thousands of comments. This is not even a comment letter. This is a resolution as an affirmative statement.
condemning the proposed rule change.
Right, exactly.
Condemning. I don't even know what the rule change is.
You can
let me
research
just
that. I
finish.
will
Yeah, let
email
Ms.
it to you.
Cunningham finish.
If folks wanted to read the rule, this has been available for quite a long time. You can go online and Google this and find it in 3 seconds. So if folks want to read the proposed rule, I'm sure there's ample opportunity to do so. This is an affirmative statement of support. If you're looking for a reason not to support it, then I get that, but I'm looking for a reason to support it because it is an affirmative statement. It is not a comment letter. It is not instructive. It is not giving implications or the unintended consequences. It is merely an affirmative statement. I think we should take it for what it is.
Brian, did you have something, or are you all good?
Yeah, really quickly, I fully agree with Mr. Fine and Mr. Bullock on the issue. I do see some concerns with the concept of calling on resolutions, and I've probably done 40 proclamations in my time here, and I do think those have been effective in terms of communicating individual legislators, groups of legislators' supports for issues before other governments. I do remember one time we did something very similar to calling on resolution. It was something Phil Steck did. I think it was something like a 3-hour debate, and
Is that the gun one?
it was a gun one, or it was something,
Well, whatever, it's
I
not
don't
a
remember. It was something, war, I don't remember, but, it was a 3-hour debate, and it didn't go anywhere, and when there is a different alternative for proclamations out there, I'm not sure that that's an effective use of the taxpayers' time, but I do fully agree with this issue.
Amen.
I would suggest going forward tonight, maybe we could consider a motion with that recommendation to get this out.
Mr. Fine, what would you like to do?
I'll propose move it out without recommendation.
Are you making that motion?
I'm going to make that motion.
Is there a second? There's a second, so there's a motion.
Wait a minute, the sponsor can't make the motion to move
I'll
it
make the
forward.
motion to
Okay.
move it without a recommendation.
Is there a second? Mr. Mariano?
Did you second it?
This is the motion to move out item number 22 without recommendation. We can have this great debate on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Mr. Kraus and Mr. Bergdorf. All right, it's out with no recommendation. And we'll talk about the urging versus this new creative attempt. Like, you get an A for creativity, Mr. Fine. I've never seen this happen before.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. I think it's always good when we explore doing new things.
Sure.
Just because we
Item
haven't done
number
it before
23.
doesn't mean we shouldn't do it in the future.
This is Resolution 524, reaffirming the terms of local law L by Mr. Bergdorf.
I'd like everybody to take one of these.
Stone Style.
My congratulations to the people who banned styrofoam. You won the war, but I think one of the things we have to do is kind of manage the peace. And here's what I'm trying to do today. Huh?
Oh, geez. God forbid there be a diversity of
Okay, I
opinion.
got it, I'm sorry. We have a group of contracts, okay, that are in place and that were probably negotiated prior to 2016, before there were any rules, styrofoam, no styrofoam, et cetera. And it's contracts that we have for both home-delivered meals and for congregate dining. On this particular handout, I've just focused on the home-delivered meals. And one of the things that you are going to see is that every year, and I asked Scott Siegel when he was here with the budget presentation, the amount that we give these contractors to provide meals goes up because there's more demand for home-delivered meals, but the unit price remains the same. So the $8.95 that Senior Services of Albany gets and $8.73 that the Senior Projects of Ravenna and the Peter Young Health Services, the $8.95, those numbers have remained the same for many years. I asked Deputy Commissioner Siegel if, as a result of the styrofoam law, people who had contracts in place, could get some sort of credit or adjustment for increased costs to go away from styrofoam packaging. And he said, no, they can't, because our contracts specifically say that the unit price cannot change, okay? They can add money, if you need an extra 1,000 meals, they can add another $8,900 and whatever dollars, but they can't change the $8.95 to a higher number to accommodate increased packaging costs. So what do we have? We know the county executive also, in signing the legislation, issued an executive order that said that where is it, number 2? The county executive has issued a press release indicating he has signed an executive order that mandates all county agencies and vendors immediately end the use of polystyrene for food. Okay? So I'm not quite sure how he did that, with what authority, because it took the legislature to ban it in restaurants, but I don't know that the county executive has that authority, but he's asserted it. But as it sits right now, there is no waiver program in place. I asked the health commissioner, first, they got a couple of steps they got to do. First, they got to come up with regs. The regs say what you can use in a health service establishment, because we have language about certain paper, and paper has to be compostable, or it can't have wax substances or whatever. So if you're a business, you need to know what you can do and what you can't do as you're buying product for 2019. By the way, this goes into effect on March 27th. It was filed with the Secretary of State on September 27th, and there's a 6-month lead time. So the health commissioner indicated probably a month ago that they were trying to figure out where to go. I asked the county executive's office last week if they could give me an update on both the regulations and on the waiver process, and I have not heard anything back. I asked them if they could get it to me before tonight, and they said they would try. I have heard nothing. But one thing is abundantly clear, and that is for these not-for-profits, they're going to incur increased costs as a result of styrofoam. There are some people who believe it won't cost any more. Well, I've got 3 businesses down here. Okay, 3, I don't know whether the last time you bought, 100,000 plates of something was, but, yeah, well, I'm telling you what it is now in 2018 going into 19. Business A, $25,000, business, and that's actually 25 to 40,000. Business B, 30,000, business C, 6 to 8. So there are costs. So if you're a not-for-profit, if you're Peter Young, or if you're Senior Projects of Ravenna, if you've got to take money out of your budget, you got to take it out of food. You have no place else to take it out of. So if your packaging costs are going up a quarter, 40 cents, 50 cents per meal, and there are very strict guidelines on what the temperature of food has to be in order to be delivered. So there's a very small window. This packaging is going to cost more money. What I'm asking you to consider is for these vendors, these not-for-profits that actually do business with the county, to allow them to go to the county attorney and say, hey, I have an increased cost. Here's my packaging. Here's my packaging cost from last year. Here's what they're going to be this year. And would you consider giving me an amendment to my contract and then bringing that amendment back to the county legislature?
Mr. Bergdorf, I mean, I see your point. Are you looking to move it out tonight, or are you just
I would
introducing
like
it for
to.
consideration?
That's the question.
Sure.
Believe me, I would love to move it out tonight. It's going to be on a health committee agenda on Wednesday.
I mean, I guess my issue with it is the second to last resolve clause, which basically mandates that any of these not-for-profits get a waiver without asking for one.
No, they get a waiver if they assert that they have increased costs until such time as there's a determination as to whether or not. If you feel that's too restrictive, see, right now, there isn't even a waiver process.
Well, it's not in effect yet either. I mean, the resolution's sort of premature. It's not going to go into effect until March.
Okay, so when should there be a waiver process? When should a business plan on their expenditures for the year 2019?
You're assuming that the regs aren't going to be done by March, and that a business can't go through the normal course of business like the statute contemplates. And that's fine. You know, that's your opinion.
Well, I've asked repeatedly for the status of where everything is.
Sure, I can't control what the county executive gives you, but I understand your point. I mean, that's my personal perspective on it. Joanne has some questions.
If that were the only objection, I would say,
Table until March.
no, I would say take that section out. You don't want to give them the waiver, that's fine. But create a mechanism so that people who can demonstrate costs don't have to take the costs out of senior or frail communities' food. That's all. This is not for benefit of anyone other than 3 or 4 not-for-profits who do business with Albany County and don't have other revenue streams. So,
I have a couple questions.
sure, shoot.
So I think that, I think you're making the assumption that the county exec is not gonna have a plan in place, either the regs or the waiver process in place at an appropriate time. Just because you don't have the answers that you've asked for, doesn't mean that they're not working on a game plan. So I kinda have a problem with assuming that our county executive isn't on top of this, because I would strongly believe that he is. The other issue I have, I think there's certain sections of this that, to me, should have been offered as amendments to the actual local law and not relitigated in an additional resolution. So, you described it as the, environmentalists won the war. To me, this is kind of refighting some of the battle. And I'm not sure it's framed in a way that, to me, should have been offered, many of these things, as amendments.
Do you remember when we had our first styrofoam debate? The first one that came out differently than the most recent one. I actually tried, when these contracts were issued, to put in amendments that said, in the event that rules changed, those costs could be passed along. I was voted, it was an amendment which was voted down, and I was told, we don't make those accommodations until something becomes law.
So, can I just ask,
Sure.
though, is it your understanding that these entities can't renegotiate their?
Absolutely, Scott. There is
So they
language,
cannot-
there is language in the contracts that says the unit price cannot be adjusted. It takes a legislative response to say, okay, in this instance,
So contracts that, that the county is engaged in,
correct.
they can't go to their particular agencies they work with and say, look, we'd like to.
No, they would have to
inform."
do, they would have to do new contracts. There cannot be amendments. I'll show you the language.
So.
It says the unit price may not be adjusted.
What's the expiration on the contracts?
Well, actually, what's happened with them is the initial ones, we've tracked them back to 2016. They're one of those ones where they were out and they were procured, and then they say they can be renewed every year. So they just renew them, and they say, oh, we have more need. Instead of 10,000 meals, we're doing 11,000 meals, okay? So they give them more money to do more meals at the same unit price. So the unit prices have stagnated.
But that, to me, indicates that many of these contracts are annual, so they will be revisited.
No, they were just done in February.
Okay.
Paul, can we,
So they will be done in February again?
can we table this just for the month so we can try to get some more information about these contracts?
You know
How many
something,
are-
I have absolutely no problem if the committee would like to table it. If somebody, I have the contracts here, I'd be delighted to share them with you. There is no pride of authorship here. All I'm trying to do is say that these three organizations and the people that run congregate meal programs, if they do have legitimate costs, does this body feel, since we impose those costs on them for the period of time?
But why wouldn't you assume that they would be granted a waiver if they seek one?
Well, let me read you the language in their contracts. Their contracts, it specifically says,
It doesn't, they're not
Ernest, could you show me
precluded
the-
from asking for a waiver, though.
Well, more importantly, the county executives, the executive order indicates it's not going to grant them.
So, and quite frankly, as a matter of policy, I agree with that. That's my opinion.
Me too.
You know,
But Chairman, that also means though, if you agree, that means if they increase costs,
I'm well aware.
they
of
have
what
to
it- I'm
pay
well aware of
for it in
what
some
means.
fashion.
how do they pay for it?
So,
You get
The
6
other-
inches of, 6 ounces of milk instead of 8? You get 3 ounces of meat instead of 6?
The other issue I would say is, I think that making an assumption that this market is not a static market, this packaging market is a very fluid market. You don't think the prices of non-styrofoam packaging are gonna change?
Ms. Pulaski has a question, so I'd like her to, she had her hand up.
I just want to clarify that Senior Projects of Urbana is crucial. It does a great job. We can't cut them down. And if we need to increase their money to cover the styrofoam transition to biodegradable products, then we need to do that. What do we do? We need to get that done.
Duly noted.
Competitive.
Mr. Bullock and the drink, and then I want the sponsor to, address the tabling here. We're gonna table it, we're gonna put a motion up, but we gotta keep moving here.
But styrofoam isn't the only thing that can affect fixed costs. Everything affects fixed costs, and it's a formula. So I don't believe that the styrofoam cost is substantial to any one of these organizations. As a matter of fact, when they start reusing things and they start, that kind of practice where they do their dishes right in some of these congregate meal places that I've seen, like St. Vincent's does it, they actually save money.
What about
So,
the 150,000 meals that they bring
Alright,
to
Todd,
people's homes?
did you have a point you wanted to make?
I did. I'm kind of surprised, actually, Legislator Plotsky brought up, hey, she has personal familiarity with one of these. Paul's obviously talked to her, researched all of these. I guess, I don't disagree necessarily with anything we've done. I mean, we voted on it as a body, we've got a new regulation in place, right? Fine. But we are costing money, it's right here on the paper. Why, from the very same population that seeks to serve the underserved, why the fight? Why not give them a break for a year, let them get it's not gonna end the environment. We can agree on that, right? It's been going on for decades, so we're making positive steps environmentally, right? Why not give these guys a break? That's just me standing here watching this, so thank you for my...
Well, I'm not looking for anything that's unrealistic. I'm saying somebody that has increased costs. Go to the county attorney. Demonstrate the increased costs. I don't care if Doug's sitting in the room with the county attorney. A bill for 50,000 plates of this versus 50,000 plates of that, it's kind of clear. It costs this or it costs that. But in the event that there are legitimate costs, once again, I'm not saying that they automatically adopt it, I'm saying they're eligible to come back to us for our consideration. That's all.
Yeah, I think
We would
that
take a look at it, that's what I'm asking.
Sam,
If you would like me to take out the automatic waiver, I'll take out the automatic waiver if that's what giving people, agita.
alright, we still have other items on the agenda, so.
Okay,
Do you
well-
wanna table this? Do you wanna vote on it? It's your bill, it's up to you.
I'm trying to figure out what would change between now and,
For me,
yeah,
nothing.
nothing. Okay.
That's my opinion, I
No,
don't know.
that's what I mean. I consider this an equity issue for not-for-profit costs.
Sorry, we disagree.
It's not a cost, okay.
Doug's not on the committee, so he doesn't get a vote. Yeah.
You haven't demonstrated.
One last thing, can I make a comment?
Well, I'd like Mr. Bergdorf to,
I think anytime a government imposes upon business an additional cost when that business is locked into a contract with that government, that's not a fair and equitable situation.
the law's not in effect yet, that's my point, When the
Well,
law goes into
but-
effect, then I'm happy to look at that. That's my opinion, that's just me.
No, I
They
understand.
haven't
that.
even done the waiver process
Well,
with the health
that's-
department.
yes,
Come
and
on,
everybody understands,
let them
so-
have the waiver process. That'll happen.
Alright,
You know what I'd
Evidently,
like you to do? I'd like you to send it out without recommendation, as you did with Sam's. And this will be on discussion before the Health Committee meeting on Wednesday.
okay.
And if,
I see what you're going.
I'm willing to, if somebody's got a sense as to how to make this better, or
Alright,
Chris, you want to take out that
so
provision?
motion, send it out without rec,
I'll make that motion.
one by Mr. Kraus, second by Mr. Plotsky, all in favor.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, all opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, doesn't have a majority, so it doesn't go out.
Can you yell out the opposed again? I gotta get the vote.
Dean, Joanne, Mayo, fine. So it's tough.
And who are the yeses? And there's, okay. Yeah, it's
Okay.
tied, so it's defeated.
If Mr. Clanahan was here, then we'd have a different story. Item number 23, resolution number 524, reaffirming the terms of local law L. No, we did that. Item number 24. This is public hearing, local law N. Mr. Drake, this is yours, this is the public hearing.
Yes, indeed. I'd like to pass this out.
Is this the updated public hearing notice?
Yes. Well, no, not the public hearing notice.
Well,
that's
this is
the-
just the public hearing resolution.
Updated law.
Right, but do you want the updated law to
Sure.
discuss the public hearing?
Yep. And
Presuming.
if you want this out, we have to amend the date.
Yes, we do. It's January. Changes were made as requested, and,
Old version on one side, new version on the other?
yes, old version on the back, Says old version.
Here's the new version. All right, this is for the public hearing. We need to make a motion to amend the date,
You do.
January,
Can I just
January
ask one
29th.
question?
January 29th. Let me just get through this process. Is there a motion to amend the date on Resolution 525 to January 29th, 2019? Motion by Mr. Fee, seconded by Mr. Farrell, in favor? Aye. All right, so the date's been amended. Your question, and then we'll vote.
So, my struggle with this is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Is it that we can't find someone for this position? Is it, like, what is the problem we're trying to solve?
The problem is we haven't found somebody. And via this local law, I'm hoping to make some changes that make it more conducive to finding someone, and also candidly sheds, bring some light on the fact that we don't have somebody. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to emphasize economic development in Albany County and its stewardship.
And the reason we don't have someone, we're convinced that it's because of this language is too restrictive?
I'm convinced that we don't have someone because we're not getting the right candidates. Whether or not, I've had conversations with a lot of people, and we've been down this road because it's been around for a long time. I've had conversations with a lot of people, regionally, as well as, the executive's office and so on, and, I've been told that we haven't been able to find the right candidates, and I think this is important.
All right, well, thank you for the new version. This is on the public hearing alone as amended, Mr. Feeney.
make a motion, move it
Motion.
out.
Second.
Second and all in favor?
Aye.
All right, public hearing's out on that. Resolution number 526, this is local law T. This is Mr. Drake's also. Term limits.
This is also a public hearing for the 25th, right?
Your date is correct here.
Yeah, okay.
Any questions on this public hearing? Your motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Kraus, seconded by Mr. Bergdorf. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, this is out. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Item number 26, Resolution 527. This is public hearing on proposed local law U. This is Mr. Smith's. Mr. Smith, not here, so we'll table this. Right now, 27 is tabled, which is the other line, local law.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thanks, everyone.